My daughter thought I didn't see her slip those papers into the sewing box. She was wrong. I'm Aldous Devereaux, and 30 minutes later, I was dialing 911 to report my own child. What I found hidden in that antique Singer box didn't just break my heart. It shattered everything I thought I knew about the person I raised. Bank statements, transfer receipts, evidence of a betrayal so deep it made my 35 years as a detective look like child's play. See, Beatrix assumed her old man was losing his edge, figured she could fool the retired cop who'd forgotten more about catching thieves than she'd ever learn. She had no idea that some skills never fade. If you're enjoying this story, I'd love to have you subscribe and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Your support means everything, because what happened next destroyed our family forever and exposed a crime that would shock the entire community. It all started when I noticed the numbers didn't add up. Let me back up. After 35 years with Phoenix PD, I thought I'd seen every kind of betrayal. Then Florence passed from pancreatic cancer, and I started the charity in her memory. Florence's Hope Cancer Fund. We'd raised $340,000 in 2 years, helping local patients with treatment costs. Beatrix volunteered as our coordinator. 15 hours a week, she said, handling donor databases, depositing checks, managing our website. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She was my daughter. But small things started bothering me. Administrative costs appearing on statements. $3,200 monthly that I couldn't track. When I asked Beatrix about them, she'd pat my shoulder. "Dad, you're getting forgetful. I showed you these invoices last week." "Let me see them again." "You don't need to worry about every little detail. I've got this handled." That phrase became her favorite. "I've got this handled, Dad." Like I was some doddering old fool who couldn't balance a checkbook. The worst part? I started believing her, started second-guessing myself. Maybe I was forgetting things. Maybe retirement had dulled my edge. Maybe Beatrix really did have everything under control. Then I noticed the donor checks. Mrs. Patterson's monthly donation of $800. The Hendersons' yearly contribution of $5,000. Beatrix always insisted on picking up the mail, always handled the deposits personally. "It's easier if I do it, Dad. You know how banks are with old people." Old people? My own daughter talked about me like I belonged in a nursing home. I was 68, not 98, but Beatrix treated me like I was already mentally gone. The breaking point came during our September board meeting. 5 local business owners who helped oversee the charity. Beatrix ran the meeting like she owned the place. "Unfortunately, my father's health has been declining," she announced. "Memory issues, you understand, so I'll be taking over day-to-day operations." I sat there speechless while she painted me as incompetent in front of people I'd known for decades. Tom Bradley from Bradley Hardware looked at me with pity. Susan Walsh nodded sympathetically. They bought every word. But here's what Beatrix didn't know about her old man. 35 years investigating fraud teaches you to spot patterns, and the pattern was becoming clear. Missing money, convenient explanations, a daughter who suddenly saw dollar signs every time she looked at our charity accounts, a daughter who'd gotten divorced 6 months earlier and was struggling financially, a daughter who'd been acting strange whenever I mentioned bank statements or donor receipts. I started paying closer attention, started asking harder questions, started acting like the detective I used to be instead of the helpless old man Beatrix wanted me to be. Because 127 local cancer patients depended on Florence's hope. People like Mrs. Eleanor Whitman, whose $18,500 treatment was pending approval. People who couldn't afford to have their lifeline stolen by someone they trusted. If I was wrong about Beatrix, I'd apologize and back off. But if I was right, if my own daughter was stealing from cancer patients, well, then she was about to learn that this old detective still had some fight left in him. The evidence was already starting to pile up. I just had to be smart about gathering it. Because Beatrix wasn't stealing from me. She was stealing from people who were fighting for their lives. And that made this personal in ways she couldn't imagine. But first, I needed proof. Real proof that would hold up in court. Because if Beatrix thought she could manipulate her forgetful father, she was about to discover just how sharp my memory really was. The stakes hit me like a freight train when I really looked at the numbers. $73,500 missing over 6 months. Money that was supposed to keep people alive. Let me tell you what 73,000 means in cancer treatment terms. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman needed 18,000 for her chemotherapy. The Morrison family owed 22,000 for their daughter's surgery. James Fletcher required 15,000 for radiation treatments that couldn't wait. These weren't statistics. These were neighbors. People from my church. Families I'd known for decades. And someone was stealing their hope. I spread the bank statements across my kitchen table like evidence from a homicide. September through February. Pattern after pattern of unauthorized withdrawals. Always on Fridays. Always when I was at my weekly doctor's appointment. Always exactly when Beatrix knew I wouldn't be watching. The deposits looked normal on paper. Checks came in from donors, got recorded properly, but then mysterious administrative fees appeared. Equipment rentals that didn't exist. Office supplies we never ordered. Consulting fees for services nobody provided. Every fraudulent charge had one thing in common. Beatrix's electronic signature authorizing the expense. I called Wells Fargo and asked for copies of all transaction records. The banking representative, a young woman named Claire, walked me through 6 months of activity. Mr. Devereaux, I see multiple wire transfers to an account registered under Desert Winds Gaming. Are these legitimate charity expenses? Desert Winds Gaming. I wrote that name down and circled it 3 times. Beatrix had a gambling problem. Had to be. Why else would charity money be flowing to a casino operation? But the worst discovery came when I calculated what we'd lost in real terms. 18 families had been turned away in the last 3 months. 18 cancer patients who qualified for assistance but couldn't get help because the money wasn't there. Mrs. Patterson called me in tears last Tuesday. Her husband's treatment was being delayed because we couldn't cover the copay. $1,500. That's all she needed. $1,500 that should have been sitting in our account if my daughter hadn't stolen it for poker games and slot machines. The charity was hemorrhaging reputation too. Dr. Martinez at Phoenix General stopped referring patients to us. Word was spreading that Florence's hope was unreliable, that we made promises we couldn't keep. Aldous, he told me during a chance encounter at the grocery store, I hate to say this, but I can't recommend your fund anymore. Too many families have been disappointed. Each disappointed family felt like a betrayal of Florence's memory. She'd spent her final months planning this charity, talking about the good we could do, the lives we could save. And now her own daughter was turning it into a personal piggy bank. But the legal stakes scared me most. If the Arizona Attorney General's office investigated our finances, they'd discover the missing money immediately. Nonprofit fraud carries serious penalties. The charity would lose its tax-exempt status. Donors would demand refunds. Everything Florence and I built would collapse. Worse yet, if Beatrix had been forging my signature on authorization forms, I could be criminally liable as the charity's founder. At 68 years old, I couldn't afford a fraud conviction. My pension, my reputation, my freedom, all at risk because I'd trusted my daughter. I'd already depleted $45,000 from my personal savings to cover shortfalls without understanding why they existed. My retirement account was shrinking to prop up a charity my own child was robbing blind. The insurance company was asking questions too. Why were our medical reimbursements so high compared to our documented donations? Why did our expense ratios look suspicious compared to similar organizations? Time was running out. Every day, Beatrix maintained access to our accounts. More money disappeared. More families got turned away. More of Florence's legacy got destroyed. But here's what kept me up at night. Beatrix wasn't just stealing money. She was stealing hope from people who had nothing else. When you're fighting cancer, hope is everything. It's the difference between giving up and fighting another day. Every dollar she took was a day of treatment someone couldn't afford. Every forged signature was a family that would lose their house to medical bills. Every lie she told me was another cancer patient who might not make it to Christmas. The math was brutal and simple. At the current rate of theft, Florence's hope would be bankrupt by summer. 127 patients would lose their lifeline. Dozens of families would face financial ruin, and my wife's memory would be destroyed by the person who should have protected it most. That's when I stopped being a worried father and started being a detective again. Because Beatrix had made this about more than family betrayal. She'd made it about justice for people who couldn't fight back. And after 35 years of catching criminals, I wasn't about to let the biggest one live in my own house. I decided to confront Beatrix directly on October 8th. She was sitting at my kitchen table, laptop open, supposedly updating donor files for the charity. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Beatrix, I need to ask you about some discrepancies." She looked up with that patient smile she'd perfected, the one that said she was humoring a confused old man. "What kind of discrepancies, Dad?" I placed September's bank statement in front of her, highlighted the Desert Winds gaming wire transfer. A $3,200 sent on September 15th at 2:47 p.m. "What's this charge?" Her face didn't change. Professional poker players probably envied that level of control. "Consulting fee, website maintenance for the charity portal." Desert Winds Gaming maintains websites? They're a tech company, Dad. Gaming refers to software development. Smooth, confident, almost believable. But I'd heard thousands of lies during interrogations. This one had the telltale pause before the explanation, the slight uptick in vocal pitch, the over-specific details nobody asked for. "Show me their invoice. I'll have to dig it up from my files." "I'll wait." That patient smile flickered for just a second. "Dad, you don't need to micromanage every expense. The board approved these consulting costs months ago." "Which board members?" "Tom, Susan, and the others. You were there." "I was there for every board meeting. We never discussed website consulting." Her laugh came out forced, brittle around the edges. "Your memory isn't what it used to be, Dad. Dr. Williams said that's normal for men your age." There it was, the gaslighting technique she'd been perfecting for months. Make me question my own recollection, make me feel incompetent, make me grateful she was handling things I supposedly couldn't manage. "My memory is fine, Beatrix. Show me the invoice." "I don't appreciate this accusatory tone. I don't appreciate $3,200 disappearing without explanation." "It didn't disappear, I just told you where it went." "To a gambling website." Her composure cracked slightly, a tiny flinch around her eyes. "That's ridiculous. Why would I—" "Because you have a gambling problem." Dead silence. Beatrix stared at me like I'd slapped her. Then the anger came flooding out. "How dare you? I've been keeping this charity afloat while you wander around feeling sorry for yourself. I handle the donors, the paperwork, the day-to-day operations that you can't manage anymore. I managed a police department for 3 decades. That was then. This is now." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're not the sharp detective you used to be, Dad. It means you need help, whether you admit it or not." The disrespect in her voice hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't concern for my well-being. This was contempt. Pure, calculated contempt, designed to make me back down and stop asking questions. "I want to see the charity's books. All of them." "No." "I beg your pardon?" I said no. You're not mentally equipped to review complex financial documents anymore. One look at these spreadsheets and you'll get confused and start making wild accusations. Wild accusations like asking where $73,000 went? Another flinch. Bigger this time. I was hitting close to the actual total. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." "This conversation is over, Dad. I'm trying to protect you from unnecessary stress, but you're making it impossible." She started packing up her laptop with sharp, angry movements. "If you can't trust me to manage the charity properly, maybe you should find someone else to volunteer 15 hours a week for free." "Maybe I should." That stopped her cold. She turned around with genuine surprise in her eyes. "What did you say?" "Maybe I should find someone else. You can't run this charity without me. You barely understand how to use email. I manage police budgets worth millions of dollars. I think I can figure out a small nonprofit." That was 20 years ago when your mind was still sharp. My mind is sharp enough to spot a thief. The kitchen went dead quiet. Beatrix's face flushed red, then pale, then red again. She was calculating her next move, trying to decide whether to keep playing victim or go on the offensive. I'm not going to stand here and listen to these paranoid delusions. When you're ready to apologize for this baseless attack on my character, you know where to find me. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Beatrix. She stopped but didn't turn around. The financial records, I want them by tomorrow. Get them yourself, old man. The door slammed so hard the windows rattled, and there it was. Her true feelings about her old man finally revealed. No more fake concern, no more patronizing patience, just raw contempt for the father she thought she could rob blind. But Beatrix had made a crucial mistake. She'd shown her hand too early, revealed the anger and desperation underneath the caring daughter act. Professional criminals know better than to lose their temper during questioning. I sat in my empty kitchen listening to her car speed away and smiled for the first time in months, because now I knew for certain my daughter was guilty. And angry people make mistakes, careless mistakes that leave evidence behind. The real investigation was about to begin. After Beatrix stormed out, I sat in my kitchen feeling oddly calm. She'd called me an old man like it was an insult. What she didn't understand was that being an old man meant I'd had time to make friends in useful places. I opened my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in 6 months. Agent Fulton Pierce, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Fulton and I went way back, partners for 3 years in the 90s when he was still Phoenix PD before he jumped to federal work. Aldous Devereaux, his voice boomed through the speaker. Haven't heard from you since Christmas. How's retirement treating you? Could be better, Fulton. I need some advice. Personal or professional? Both. Hypothetically, if someone were embezzling from a non-profit charity, what kind of evidence would you need for charges? Long pause. Fulton knew I didn't ask hypothetical questions. Documented financial records, bank statements showing unauthorized transactions, paper trail linking the suspect to the missing funds. Why? Someone stealing from Florence's charity? Possibly. Jesus, Aldous. Who would steal from cancer patients? Someone who thinks the old man running it won't notice. Another pause, then Fulton's voice turned serious. What kind of amounts are we talking about? 73,000 so far? Federal crime, wire fraud if it crossed state lines. 20 years minimum if convicted. You want me to take a look? Not yet. I need to gather more evidence first. Be careful, old friend. Financial fraud cases require bulletproof documentation. One missing link and smart lawyers make everything disappear. After we hung up, I walked to my study and opened the closet I hadn't touched in 3 years. Behind Florence's winter coats, wrapped in plastic, sat the equipment box from my last undercover case. The Motorola surveillance camera was smaller than a pack of cigarettes. The digital recorder still held an 8-hour charge. The wireless transmitter could broadcast to my laptop from 50 feet away. Outdated by today's standards, but functional. More importantly, legally admissible if properly documented. I'd installed similar systems in dozens of stakeouts. Husband embezzling from his business, nurse stealing drugs from the hospital, city councilman taking bribes from developers. Same pattern every time. Trust, opportunity, and the belief they were too smart to get caught. But first, I needed help from another old friend. Huey Brennan answered on the first ring, 25 years at Wells Fargo, now head of security operations. We'd worked together on a mortgage fraud case back in '08. Huey, it's Aldous Devereaux. I need a favor. Name it. Can you flag suspicious activity on a specific account? Florence's Hope Cancer Fund. Someone's been making unauthorized withdrawals. How unauthorized? $73,000 unauthorized. Huey whistled. Internal or external theft? Internal. Someone with legitimate access. That's the worst kind. They know exactly how to avoid detection protocols. But yes, I can set up monitoring alerts. Any unusual activity, and you'll know immediately. What about transaction histories? Easy. I can provide 6 months of detailed records. Every check, every transfer, every electronic signature. If someone's been forging authorizations, we'll spot it. By evening, the pieces were falling into place. Fulton would handle federal jurisdiction when the time came. Huey would provide the financial evidence. And I had surveillance equipment that could document criminal activity in real time. Beatrix thought she was dealing with a confused old man who couldn't balance a checkbook. She had no idea she was up against 35 years of investigative experience and a network of law enforcement contacts who specialized in catching thieves. The next morning, I made one more call. Detective Gareth Morrison, my old protege at Phoenix PD. Now, Lieutenant Morrison, running the Financial Crimes Unit. Lieutenant Morrison's office. Gareth, it's Aldous. Mentor, how's civilian life? Complicated. I might need backup soon. What kind of backup? The kind where someone gets arrested for stealing from cancer patients. His tone shifted immediately. You want to meet for coffee? Sounds like we need to talk. As I hung up, I realized Beatrix had made a critical error. She'd assumed that retirement meant isolation, that age meant helplessness, that a man in his 60s couldn't fight back against someone half his age. She was about to learn that respect isn't something you lose when you turn 68. It's something you earn over 35 years of never backing down from a fight. The annual Florence's Hope Charity Gala was scheduled for October 12th at the Phoenix Country Club. Black tie optional, $50 a plate, with silent auctions and testimonials from families we'd helped. I'd been planning it for months as our biggest fundraiser of the year. Beatrix insisted on handling all the arrangements. Dad, you just focus on your speech. I'll manage everything else. What I didn't expect was for her to use the gala as a stage for my public humiliation. 150 people filled the ballroom. Donors, board members, local business owners, and families whose medical bills we'd covered. The cream of Phoenix society, all gathered to support cancer patients in our community. Beatrix looked stunning in a black cocktail dress, working the room like a professional fundraiser, shaking hands, thanking donors, accepting compliments on the evening's organization. Everyone loved her. Your daughter's amazing, Tom Bradley told me during cocktail hour. We're lucky she's stepping up to handle more responsibilities. Stepping up how? Taking over operations while you focus on your health. Smart move, Aldous. Succession planning's important at our age. My health? I felt fine. What had Beatrix been telling people? Dr. Patricia Wells approached during dinner with a concerned expression. Aldous, how are you feeling? Beatrix mentioned you've been having some memory issues lately. My memory's fine. Of course it is. We all have senior moments. Nothing to be embarrassed about. Senior moments, like forgetting where I put my keys, was the same as early-stage dementia. The evening's program started with testimonials. Mrs. Henderson spoke about her daughter's successful cancer treatment, funded by our charity. The Morrison family shared how we'd covered their son's surgery costs. Powerful stories that brought tears to several eyes. Then Beatrix took the microphone for her speech. Good evening, everyone. I'm Beatrix Devereaux Walsh, and I want to thank you for supporting Florence's Hope Cancer Fund. Applause filled the ballroom. She waited for it to die down, then smiled warmly at the crowd. Many of you have asked about recent changes in our organization's leadership structure. I want to address those questions directly. Changes in leadership structure? This was news to me. As you know, my father Aldous founded this charity to honor my mother's memory. His passion and dedication have been inspiring to watch. More applause. I started to relax. Maybe this was just a heartfelt tribute. However, as Dad has gotten older, we've noticed some challenges. Memory issues, difficulty managing complex financial details, confusion about day-to-day operations. My blood turned cold. And she was doing this, actually doing this in front of everyone I knew. Dr. Williams has explained that these changes are completely normal for men Dad's age. Nothing to be ashamed of or worried about. Concerned murmurs rippled through the audience. People were looking at me with pity. Poor Aldous, losing his mind at 68. So I've been gradually taking over operational responsibilities, handling donor communications, managing bank accounts, overseeing our medical payment system. Dad still provides guidance and inspiration, but the detailed work has become too challenging for him. Susan Walsh nodded sympathetically. Frank Patterson whispered something to his wife. The entire room was buying this performance. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that the board has officially appointed me as Executive Director of Florence's Hope Cancer Fund. Wait, what? The board hadn't met in 3 weeks. When did this vote happen? This transition ensures continuity of services for the families who depend on us. Dad will remain as founder emeritus, providing wisdom and oversight without the stress of day-to-day management. Founder emeritus, a fancy title for a figurehead with no real authority. The applause was thunderous. People were standing, clapping for Beatrix's selfless dedication to caring for her declining father while maintaining his charitable legacy. I sat frozen in my chair, watching my daughter receive credit for my life's work, while simultaneously destroying my reputation as a competent adult. Dad, would you like to say a few words? All eyes turned to me, 150 people waiting to see how the confused old man would embarrass himself at his own charity event. I stood slowly, walked to the microphone, and looked out at the crowd. These were my friends, my neighbors, people who'd known me for decades, and Beatrix had just convinced them all that I was losing my mental faculties. Thank you all for being here tonight. Florence would be proud to see so many people supporting cancer patients in our community. Warm smiles, encouraging nods. They were treating me like a dementia patient who'd managed to string together a coherent sentence. The charity will continue its important work. That's what matters most. Short and safe. I sat back down to polite applause, but inside I was furious. Not just angry, professionally offended. Beatrix had executed a perfect character assassination without saying anything technically untrue. She'd planted seeds of doubt about my competence, then positioned herself as the responsible daughter, protecting both me and the charity. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant manipulation. After the program ended, the social torture continued. Person after person approached with variations of the same message. You must be so proud of Beatrix. What a blessing to have such a devoted daughter. She's handling everything so well during this difficult time. Dr. Martinez pulled me aside near the coat check. Aldous, I want you to know that memory issues don't diminish your accomplishments. You should be proud of what you've built here. Memory issues, past tense accomplishments. They were already talking about me like I was finished. The final insult came as we were leaving. Beatrix linked her arm through mine in a show of filial devotion. Dad, why don't you ride with me? I don't think you should be driving at night anymore. I drove myself here just fine. I know, but why take chances? We'll pick up your car tomorrow. Tom Bradley overheard and nodded approvingly. Smart thinking, Beatrix. Safety first. So I rode home in the passenger seat of my own daughter's car, listening to her chat about what a successful evening it had been. The silent auction raised $12,000. Mrs. Patterson's table alone brought in $3,000 in pledges. Everyone's so excited about our new direction, meaning her direction, without interference from the senile founder. As we pulled into my driveway, Beatrix patted my hand like I was a child. I know tonight was overwhelming, Dad. Change is hard, but I promise I'll take good care of Florence's legacy. I went to bed that night knowing that my daughter had successfully stolen my charity, my reputation, and my dignity in front of everyone who mattered in my life. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed that humiliating me would break me, that public embarrassment would make me give up and accept my new role as a harmless figurehead. She had no idea that 35 years of police work had taught me something important. The best time to catch a criminal is right after they think they've won. The trap was set for October 24th. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing with the methodical precision that had made me a good detective. Every detail planned, every contingency covered, every piece of evidence documented according to FBI standards. The bait was simple. $5,000 in marked bills deposited into the charity account on Tuesday morning. Huey at Wells Fargo had provided currency with consecutive serial numbers ending in 382. Bills so fresh from the Federal Reserve that they practically glowed under UV light. The Motorola surveillance camera was positioned behind Florence's sewing box, aimed directly at the desk where Beatrix handled charity paperwork. Motion-activated recording with timestamp verification. 8 hours of battery life. Wireless transmission to my laptop in the bedroom. Wednesday morning, I played my part perfectly. Confused old man wandering around in his bathrobe, mumbling about doctor appointments and prescription medications. Beatrix, honey, I need to drive to Dr. Williams's office. My medication checkup got moved to 10 o'clock. Do you want me to drive you, Dad? No, I can manage. Probably be gone 2 hours with all that waiting around. Perfect setup. Beatrix knew I'd be away from 9:45 a.m. to noon. Plenty of time to access the charity accounts and transfer money to her gambling debts. What she didn't know was that I was parked 3 blocks away in the Denny's parking lot, watching everything on my laptop screen. At 10:15 a.m., Beatrix entered my study. She moved confidently, like she'd done this dozens of times before. Straight to the filing cabinet, pulled out bank authorization forms, sat at my desk, and opened the charity's online banking portal. The camera captured everything in high-definition detail. Her fingers typing the password, her signature on transfer authorizations, her satisfied smile when the wire transfer confirmation appeared. $5,000 sent to Desert Winds Gaming at 10:31 a.m. Then she did something I didn't expect. She opened Florence's sewing box and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were dozens of bank statements, deposit slips, and authorization forms, a complete paper trail of every theft dating back to March. She'd been hiding the evidence in my dead wife's most personal possession. The disrespect was staggering. Not just stealing from cancer patients, not just lying to my face, but desecrating Florence's memory by turning her sewing box into a storage unit for criminal evidence. That's when I stopped feeling like a betrayed father and started feeling like a cop who'd caught a particularly disgusting criminal. I called Agent Pierce from the Denny's parking lot. Fulton, it's Aldous. I've got everything we need. Video evidence? HD footage of the actual theft? Wire transfer documentation, marked bills, financial records going back 7 months. Outstanding. How do you want to handle this? Can you be at my house by 7 tonight? With backup? Definitely with backup. At 6:30 p.m., I was sitting in my kitchen when Beatrix walked in carrying takeout from Romano's Italian. I brought dinner, Dad. Your favorite chicken parmesan. She moved around the kitchen with casual familiarity, setting plates, pouring wine, chatting about her day. The performance of a loving daughter caring for her aging father. How was your doctor's appointment? Fine, just routine blood work. Good. I worry about you driving alone to medical appointments. The concern in her voice sounded genuine. If I didn't know better, I'd believe she actually cared about my well-being. Beatrix, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you choose Florence's sewing box? Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. What do you mean? To hide the bank statements. The color drained from her face, complete poker face collapse, mouth slightly open, eyes wide with the panicked realization that she'd been caught. Dad, I don't... The doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see 3 black SUVs parked in my driveway. Men in dark suits with FBI credentials walking up my front steps. Beatrix followed my gaze and saw them too. Dad, what's happening? Justice. I opened the door. Agent Pierce stood there with his badge displayed, flanked by 2 other agents I didn't recognize. Evening, Aldous. We're here about the embezzlement investigation. Come in, Fulton. She's in the kitchen. Beatrix was standing frozen by the dining table, still holding her fork, staring at the federal agents entering her father's house. Beatrix Devereaux Walsh? She nodded, unable to speak. Agent Pierce, FBI Financial Crimes Division, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement of charitable funds, and violation of federal nonprofit regulations. The Miranda rights came next. You have the right to remain silent. But Beatrix wasn't silent. She was screaming. Dad, what is this? What's happening? I don't understand. But you understand perfectly. Agent Pierce produced the evidence bag containing the marked bills. These were withdrawn from Desert Winds Gaming this afternoon, using funds stolen from Florence's Hope Cancer Fund. The serial numbers match currency deposited into the charity account yesterday morning. This is insane. Dad, tell them this is a mistake. The only mistake was thinking you could steal from cancer patients without consequences. I'm your daughter, and you're also a criminal. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Beatrix stared at me with complete incomprehension. Not just shock at being caught, but genuine bewilderment that her own father had set her up for arrest. Dad, I'm family. How could you do this to family? How could you steal from people fighting for their lives? That's different. I was going to pay it back. With what money? Your gambling debts are over $85,000. Agent Pierce looked up from his paperwork. How did you know the exact amount? I spent 35 years learning how to investigate financial crimes. Did you think I'd miss $73,000 disappearing from my own charity? The second agent presented additional evidence. Ms. Devereaux Walsh, we have surveillance footage of you forging authorization signatures, bank records showing systematic theft dating back 7 months, and testimony from casino employees confirming your gambling activity. Beatrix finally grasped the scope of her situation. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding that could be explained away. This was a federal criminal investigation with documented evidence and witness testimony. I need a lawyer. You do, Agent Pierce agreed. But first, you're coming with us. As they led her toward the door in handcuffs, Beatrix turned back one last time. Dad, they're going to destroy me. Is that what you want? I want you to face the consequences of your choices. I'm your only child. And you stole from cancer patients, including the charity named after your own mother. Her face crumpled. Finally, real emotion. Not manipulation or performance, but genuine recognition of what she'd done and what she'd lost. Dad, please. I can make this right. No, Beatrix, you can't. The door closed behind them. 3 black SUVs drove away with my daughter in federal custody. I sat in my empty kitchen, looking at 2 plates of chicken parmesan that would never be eaten, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. For the first time since Florence died, the numbers in the charity accounts would be accurate. The cancer patients would get their treatments. The donors' money would go where they intended it to go. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Pierce. Clean arrest, solid evidence. She'll probably plea bargain for reduced sentence. You did the right thing. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and toasted my wife's photograph. Florence, your charity is safe now. I promise. Outside, Detective Morrison's unmarked car was still parked across the street. Backup just in case Beatrix had tried to run or fight. But the arrest had gone smoothly. 35 years of police work had taught me that catching criminals requires patience, preparation, and the willingness to follow evidence wherever it leads, even when it leads to your own daughter. The arraignment hearing was scheduled for October 27th at the federal courthouse downtown. I sat in the gallery behind the prosecutor's table, watching my daughter face Judge Patricia Morrison. No relation to Detective Morrison, just an unfortunate coincidence of names. Beatrix looked smaller in her orange jumpsuit. 3 days in federal holding had stripped away the confident facade she'd worn for months. Her court-appointed attorney, a nervous young man named Basil Crane, shuffled through paperwork with obvious discomfort. Your Honor, the federal prosecutor began, the government has overwhelming evidence against the defendant. Video surveillance, financial records, marked currency, and sworn testimony from multiple witnesses. Judge Morrison reviewed the charges with methodical precision. Wire fraud, embezzlement of charitable funds, forgery of financial documents, money laundering through gambling establishments. Each count carried a potential sentence of 5 to 20 years in federal prison. The prosecutor continued. The defendant systematically stole $73,500 from a cancer charity over 7 months, money intended to help critically ill patients access life-saving treatments. How does the defendant plead? Basil Crane stood shakily. Not guilty, Your Honor. But everyone in that courtroom knew guilty was the only honest answer. The bail hearing came next. Chen argued for release on personal recognizance, citing Beatrix's community, ties, and lack of violent criminal history. The prosecutor objected immediately. Your Honor, the defendant poses a significant flight risk. She has gambling debts exceeding $85,000 to criminal organizations. She's demonstrated complete disregard for financial oversight and legal boundaries. Judge Morrison agreed. Bail is set at $200,000 cash, plus electronic monitoring. Beatrix's face went white. She didn't have $200,000. That money had been lost at Desert Wind's gaming tables months ago. After the hearing, I waited in the courthouse lobby as they processed her return to federal holding. Chen approached me with desperate enthusiasm. "Mr. Devereaux, I need to ask about bail. Can the family—" "No. Sir, I understand you're angry, but she's still your daughter. She's a criminal who stole from cancer patients. She needs help, not punishment. She needs both." Chen's idealistic expression reminded me of rookie cops who thought every criminal could be saved with enough compassion. Nice sentiment. Terrible law enforcement strategy. "Mr. Devereaux, if you could just consider— I considered everything for months while she was stealing from dying people. The consideration period is over." 2 hours later, Agent Pierce called with updates on the broader investigation. "We raided Desert Winds Gaming this morning. Beatrix wasn't their only victim. 17 people had been systematically funneling embezzled money through their operation." "Bigger case than we thought?" "Much bigger. Your daughter's evidence is helping us crack a multi-million-dollar money laundering scheme. She's looking at reduced sentences if she cooperates fully." "Will she cooperate?" "Smart criminals always do. Question is whether your daughter is smart or just desperate." That evening, I received a call from Tom Bradley at the charity board meeting. "Aldous, we need to discuss damage control. The story's all over local news. Charity director embezzles cancer fund. It's not great publicity." "The story is accurate." "Yes, but potential donors might hesitate if they think we can't secure their contributions. Then we implement better security measures. We also need to discuss leadership transition. With Beatrix obviously unavailable, the board feels you should resume full operational control." "I never gave up operational control." Awkward pause. "Well, yes, but we thought, given your health concerns—" "My health is fine. My memory is fine. My judgment is fine enough to catch a thief that everyone else missed." "Of course, Aldous. We never doubted your capabilities." Funny how respect returned the moment they needed someone to clean up the mess. The next morning brought better news. Huey called from Wells Fargo with recovery information. "We've frozen Desert Winds Gaming's accounts. Recovered about $42,000 so far. More coming as we trace additional transactions." "What about the rest?" "Gone. Paid out as gambling debts to collection agencies, but $42,000 will help a lot of families." Mrs. Eleanor Whitman called that afternoon with tears in her voice. "Mr. Devereaux, I heard about what happened. I'm so sorry about Beatrix." "Thank you, Mrs. Whitman. But I also wanted to thank you for getting our money back. My husband's treatment starts Monday because of you." That phone call was worth more than any apology Beatrix might offer. By evening, I was sitting in my study, updating the charity's financial records for the first time in months. Clean numbers, accurate balances, money where it belonged. The newspaper had run a front-page story. "Local charity fraud exposed by retired detective." But my phone had been ringing all day with interview requests and donation offers. People respected competence, they valued integrity, and they trusted organizations that held criminals accountable, even when those criminals were family members. Florence's hope would survive this scandal. The cancer patients would get their treatments, and I'd learned something important about the difference between family loyalty and justice. Sometimes you have to choose, and sometimes the choice is easier than you think. The fallout came in waves over the next 6 weeks. Beatrix pled guilty to all charges on December 3rd, accepting a federal plea agreement for 18 months in minimum security prison, plus 3 years supervised probation, restitution of $73,500, community service focused on nonprofit fraud prevention education. Her ex-husband filed for emergency custody modification the day after her sentencing. Unfit mother due to federal criminal conviction. The family court judge agreed. Beatrix would have supervised visitation only after completing her prison sentence. I testified at the custody hearing, the hardest 2 hours of my life. Mr. Devereaux, do you believe your daughter poses a risk to her children's welfare? I believe she made choices that demonstrated poor judgment and disregard for vulnerable people. Would you support her having unsupervised access to minors? Long pause. The entire courtroom waiting for a grandfather to protect his daughter. Not until she's proven she can be trusted again. The judge awarded full custody to Beatrix's ex-husband. My grandchildren would grow up knowing their mother was in federal prison for stealing from cancer patients. But the consequences went far beyond legal punishment. The Arizona Attorney General's office launched a comprehensive investigation into nonprofit oversight in our region. 18 other charities received surprise audits. 3 more embezzlement cases were discovered and prosecuted. The local philanthropic community implemented new safeguards. Mandatory dual signature authorization for all transactions above $1,000. Monthly third-party financial audits. Background checks for all volunteers with financial access. Florence's hope actually benefited from the scandal. Donations increased 30% as people responded to our transparency and accountability. The story of a founder who turned in his own daughter for stealing from cancer patients resonated with potential donors. Mrs. Patterson spoke for many when she called with a contribution. Mr. Devereaux, what you did took incredible courage. If you're willing to prosecute your own family to protect our money, we know our donations are safe. We established the Aldous Devereaux Integrity Fund, providing grants specifically for nonprofit security systems and fraud prevention training. Dark irony that my daughter's crimes created resources to prevent similar thefts. Detective Morrison was promoted to captain, partly for his work on our case and the broader money laundering investigation that followed. Agent Pierce received a commendation for exposing the Desert Winds gaming operation, which had facilitated over $2 million in embezzlement across Arizona. The personal costs were devastating. Christmas came and went without family dinner, no grandchildren opening presents in my living room, no daughter calling to check on her old man. Just me, Florence's photograph, and the knowledge that I'd chosen justice over family loyalty. My neighbors treated me like a celebrity for the first month. Local hero fights charity fraud. Interview requests from Arizona Republic, Phoenix New Times, even CNN wanting the story of a retired detective who caught his own daughter stealing. I declined most interviews. This wasn't about heroism. This was about basic accountability. But the isolation was real. 68 years old, living alone, estranged from my only child, because I'd sent her to federal prison. Some days I questioned whether the money was worth destroying what remained of our family. Then Mrs. Eleanor Whitman sent me a photograph. Her husband Paul, cancer-free after successful treatment, holding their new grandson, born healthy because Paul lived to see him, lived because Florence's hope funded the chemotherapy that saved his life, lived because I'd stopped my daughter from stealing the money that kept him alive. That photograph sits on my kitchen table now. A reminder that justice isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about protecting people who can't protect themselves. Dr. Martinez called in January with remarkable news. Aldous, we're referring cancer patients to Florence's hope again. Word has spread that your charity is the most trustworthy in Arizona. When people know the founder will prosecute his own daughter for theft, they trust you with their donations. The waiting list grew to over 200 families, all because donors believed their money would actually help cancer patients instead of subsidizing gambling addictions. Beatrix wrote me one letter from federal prison, brief, formal, still claiming she'd intended to repay the stolen money eventually. Dad, I hope you understand I never meant to hurt the charity or the families it serves. I made terrible mistakes, but I'm not a bad person. I never responded. Not because I didn't love her, but because love doesn't erase accountability. Good intentions don't resurrect stolen money or restore broken trust. The letter ended with a request. When I get out, can we rebuild our relationship? Maybe, someday. After she'd served her time, made full restitution, and demonstrated genuine understanding of the harm she'd caused. But trust, once broken this completely, might never heal. Florence's hope thrived without Beatrix's involvement. Clean books, honest management, families getting help instead of subsidizing casino debts. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, and sometimes that's the only choice that matters. I'm 70 now. 2 years since the arrest. 2 years since I chose justice over family loyalty and discovered what that choice really costs. Beatrix was released from federal prison last month, served 16 months with good behavior, 3 years of supervised probation ahead of her. She's working at a Phoenix call center for $9 an hour, living in a supervised halfway house, attending mandatory gambling addiction counseling twice weekly. We've had coffee once. Awkward conversation at a Starbucks near her housing facility. She apologized for the embarrassment and legal problems. Never mentioned the cancer patients whose treatments she delayed. Never acknowledged the families who suffered because she stole their hope. Dad, I understand you had to do what you thought was right. I did what was necessary. Can we move forward? Try to rebuild our relationship? That depends on you. She wants forgiveness without accountability, reconciliation without restitution, the loving father back without earning back his trust. But 37 years of police work taught me that people don't change because they get caught. They change because they accept responsibility for their choices and commit to different behavior. Florence's hope is stronger now than ever. $300,000 in annual donations, helping over 400 families yearly. Clean books audited monthly by independent accountants. Board oversight with real authority. Security measures that would catch embezzlement attempts in days, not months. The cancer patients we serve don't know about family drama or personal betrayals. They know we fund treatments that save lives. They know donations reach people who need them. They know Florence's hope means what it promises. That's the legacy that matters. I still miss my daughter. Still love the child who used to help me change oil in the garage and solve math homework at the kitchen table. But that child grew into a woman who stole from dying people and felt entitled to forgiveness simply because we share DNA. Trust isn't inherited. It's earned through consistent, honest behavior over time. Respect isn't granted because someone is family. It's built through actions that demonstrate character and integrity. Setting boundaries with people you love is the hardest thing you'll ever do. But sometimes boundaries are what love looks like when accountability matters more than comfort. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Let me know in the comments. Because sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us most and the ones who need consequences most. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way, even by your own daughter.